Hello friends, my name is Dr. Jigisha Singh and in this video I'm going to discuss about breach of contract. Now, performance has two subtopics, frustration and breach of contract. Breach of contract, how is performance possible? It could be by way of an actual performance, it could be by way of performance because of frustration, contract stands void. In such a situation, contract is assumed to have been performed. Next is agreement by mutual consent. Parties may dispense with the contract or may add new terms and conditions to a contract. In such a case, it gives rise to a new contract and the old contract stands performed. Next is breach of contract. Damages compensation given to the aggrieved party and contract stands performed. When one party does not perform the contract on the due date, in such a situation, a breach has been committed and the defaulter is entitled to pay to the other party damages by way of compensation. Sometimes parties mention the amount of compensation expressly in the terms and conditions, and sometimes it is for the court to decide the amount of compensation. Where the contract itself contains the amount of damages to be paid, Section 74 will be applicable, and where the contract is silent on the quantum of damages, Section 73 will be applicable. Now, breach of contract can take place by three methods. For example, A and B enter into an agreement on 1st October, date of performance is 30th October. First, where before the date of actual performance, one party expressly renounces his liability under the contract. It means one of the party informs to other that I am not going to perform the contract. Example, before 30th October, A and B were supposed to marry each other. A marries C, that is a breach. Next, where one party before the date of actual performance does an act or omission and thereby tender himself incapable of performing the contract. Next, where on the date of actual performance one party fails to perform his part of the contract fully or even partially. Breach of contract is of two kinds. One is anticipatory breach, the other is actual breach. Now, the first two methods that I had just told, which is where before the date of actual performance, one party expressly renounces his liability under the contract, and where one party before the date of actual performance does an act or omission and thereby tender himself incapable of performing the contract. In these two situations, methods, it is anticipatory breach, and the next is actual breach, which is failure to perform on the date of actual performance. Anticipatory breach has certain salient features. The other party is free to accept or not to accept the anticipatory breach, and if he does not accept, he has to wait for actual date of performance of the contract. Next, if anticipated breach is not accepted, the party at fault is free to perform the contract on the actual date of performance and thereby avoid the damages. Next, if anticipatory breach is not accepted and in between the contract is frustrated, the advantage of frustration will go to the party at power. Next, if anticipatory breach is accepted, damages are calculated on the date of anticipatory breach, and if it is not accepted, damages are calculated on the date of actual breach of contract. Provisions of Section 73 deals with remoteness of damages basically covered in torts and to be linked with the principles of criminal law. Section 73 provides the party at fault is liable to pay damages which naturally arose out of the usual course of events, remedies damages which the parties knew on the date of entering into contract as likely to arise as a consequence of breach of contract. Section 73 expressly incorporates the doctrine of reasonable foreseeability for calculating damages. Question of foreseeability depends on knowledge of natural course of events. Section 73 deals with 4 points. It incorporates the principles for deciding the question of damages calculation. Second, Section 73 expressly provides that no damages are to be awarded which are remote or indirect. Next, Section 73 applies to quasi contracts also. Section 68 to 72. Next, Section 73 imposes a duty on the victim of breach of contract to mitigate the damage, reduce the damage. Means if on the date of breach of contract, date of performance, party commits breach, the victim by taking reasonable steps can reduce the damages, he must do so, and if he does not, he cannot claim damages which were aggravated by breach as a result of failure to perform the duty to mitigate. So if we club first and second points, first part is general damages. They are always awarded. Second part, special damages. They arise not because of natural usual events but of special events. They can be awarded only if the special circumstances were brought to the knowledge of the party concerned at the time of entering into a contract. Knowledge required is known as imputed or objective knowledge, which law presumes that every person ought to possess. Knowledge of a reasonable person, this knowledge is imputed to every person. Actual knowledge, subjective knowledge, what was in the minds, contemplation, knowledge of the parties to the contract. In maximum number of cases, damages awarded are general damages. Provisions of Section 73 are derived from the judgment of Hadley versus Baxendale. There are number of illustrations attached to Section 73 which helps in understanding general and special damages. Illustration: A agrees to sell to B 100 copies of book at a price of rupees 50 per copy. A commits a breach of contract. On the date of breach of contract, the market price of the book is rupees 60. In majority of cases purchased from open market, there is a loss of rupees 10. These are general damages and are always awarded. However, now on the basis of the faith of A's promise, B promises to supply these books to C at a rate of 60 with a profit of rupees 10. But on the breach, no profit would be awarded. This loss of profit comes under special damages. Damages which arise on account of loss of profit because of failure to perform the contract with the third party. Example, that is C. Such damages can never be awarded unless contract with the third party was brought to the knowledge of the other party concerned at the time of entering into the contract. If B tells about its special circumstances to A, then the damages would be foreseen by A. This knowledge must be on the date of entering into the contract. It cannot be subsequent knowledge. But if A accepts this subsequent knowledge and accepts responsibility, then he could be held liable and not otherwise. This knowledge of special circumstances can be actual or constructive. B actually informs A of special circumstances, or B does not inform A of special circumstances, rather presume knowledge on the basis of certain facts. Example, A for past 10 years having a contract with B, so 11 years also surrounding circumstances taken into consideration. If he commits breach, liable for damages. No knowledge to A that B has entered into contract with state on the faith of his contract. In case of breach, A cannot be held liable. If knowledge plus acceptance of the responsibility, A will be held liable. The next is quasi contracts. After that, it is duty to mitigate damages. Section 73 requires that on the date of breach of contract, the other party must take necessary reasonable steps to reduce the damages, that is, keep it minimum. In one case, a firm of ABCD, Z was appointed by the firm as a manager for 3 years, but on expiry of 1 year, he was removed as the firm is dissolved. It is breach of contract. Damages, loss of 2 years' salary, which must be paid by the firm. However, immediately after A and B form a partnership firm and offer Z a job on same terms and conditions. Z refuses. He, that is Z, cannot claim damages as he did not take an initiative to reduce the loss. On the date of breach of contract, other party must take steps to keep damages to the minimum possible. Suppose government provides 1000 rupees per month to unemployed youth under some scheme. Z does not avail it. Now Z can claim compensation, but total which he would have got by the government will be given. Net is excluding which he did not avail. Guidelines for actual calculation of damages. Damages are always compensatory in nature and not penal as in the form of punishment. Therefore, under no circumstances the court will award damages more than the actual loss. Next, the object for awarding is to bring both the parties to a situation as if the contract has been actually performed. This is the underlying principle of awarding damages. Next, ordinarily, no damages are awarded for mere mental and mental pain and mental sufferings. In case of mental pain, damages cannot be calculated in terms of money, so actual loss cannot be calculated. However, in exceptional cases, the court may award damages even for mental pain and mental sufferings. This is done in those cases where the breach of contract results only in mental pain and sufferings and not in actual or financial monetary loss. Example, A entered into an agreement, therefore B agreed to take photos of marriage. B committed breach of contract, so no photographs could be taken. There is no monetary loss, but mental suffering damages will be awarded, keeping in mind approximate loss. Next, where the breach of contract does not result into any actual damages, neither monetary nor mental or suffering, ordinarily no damages are awarded. However, in exceptional cases, at its own discretion, court may award nominal damages, same principle as injuria sine damnum. The purpose is to recognize, vindicate the right of other party concerned. Section 74, damages have been divided into two parts: liquidated damages, damages in terms of in the form of penalty. Now, what is the distinction between Section 73 and Section 74? Where the parties in the contract themselves mention the amount of damages to be awarded on the breach of contract, Section 74 applies. Where the contract is silent on the question of damages, Section 73 will be applicable. There is a contract between, for example, there is a contract between A and B, and the terms state in case of breach, the party committing breach will pay damages of rupees 10,000. Section 74 applies. If it is not given, then Section 73 will be applicable. Section 74 expressly provides that damages must be awarded even if party concerned has suffered no actual loss. Section 74 expressly provides that damages must be awarded even if the party concerned has suffered no actual loss. This is just contrary to the fact of Section 73 that damages are compensatory in nature. These words given narrow interpretation by Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has decided that where a contract cannot result into damages in terms of money, in such cases Section 74 will be applicable. However, where the breach of contract results into damages in terms of money, the party must prove the nominal loss suffered by him, otherwise the damages shall not be awarded. This interpretation seems to be against the words in Section 74, as it provides that damages will result in actual losses. Example, A agrees to sell certain goods to B at a rate of rupees 50 per piece. A commits breach of contract. On the date of breach of contract, the price of the good in open market is rupees 60 per piece. The loss suffered is rupees 10. Supreme Court has decided that the difference between the price in the open market and the price consented for a contractual must be proved. But the party need not prove that it has actually bought from market on the date of breach. If the party cannot prove the difference, then no damages, although Section 74 says that damages to be awarded even for any loss. Under Section 74, damages are divided into two parts. When no amount is to be deposited as security, but the amount of damages to be paid in case of breach of contract is specified in the contract. Next, in case of breach of contract, the amount deposited as security will be forfeited. Now, liquidated. In certain cases, more particularly involving government and government service, government demands deposition of certain security. What is the distinction between liquidated and penalty? Where the amount mentioned in the contract seems to be a genuine pre-estimate of damages which are likely to arise in usual course of events, the damages are known as liquidated damages. Where the amount mentioned in the contract is extraordinary or abnormally high as compared to the damages likely to result from breach of contract in usual course of events, it is known as penalty. For example, in usual course of events from breach of contract, the amount of damages is 40,000 and the contract mentions rupees 5,000 genuine. 25% increase or decrease is the liquidated damage. If amount mentioned 7,000, 10,000, then penalty. This distinction is relevant where damages are held to be liquidated. The whole of the amount mentioned in contract is awarded, though the amount mentioned may be normally high than actual loss. Where and when, whereas when the amount mentioned had to be penalty, the court shall not award the actual amount mentioned in contract and shall award damages which seem to be reasonable loss. Therefore, where the amount mentioned look like penalty, the court may have the discretion to award the damages which the actual may reduce. But where amount looks the liquidated, the whole amount is awarded. However, under no circumstances the court can award damages more than the amount mentioned in the contract. So the amount mentioned in the contract is maximum. Example, amount mentioned is 5,000 and actual loss is 15,000. Only 5,000 will be given. So the discretion of the court is with regard to the reduction, not increase. Distinction between earnest money and penalty. This question arises when one party has deposited some amount as security amount. Therefore, it is divided into earnest money is equal to liquidated damages. Penalty is higher. How to decide whether earnest money or penalty? If earnest money, whole amount is forfeited. If penalty, courts can reduce the forfeiture. Why distinction is important? Where amount is held to be earnest money, whole amount is liable to be forfeited. In case of penalty, courts have a discretion to reduce it. Under section 74, amount mentioned in the contract is the maximum outer limit. More than that, court cannot award. In case of earnest money, the amount is quite nominal as compared to the damages which may be caused in the usual course of events, or it is a genuine pre-estimate of the damages. In case of penalty, the amount is abnormally high as compared to the damage which may be caused in the usual course of events. If the contract is duly performed, earnest money is always adjusted in the final payment under the contract. If it is penalty, the final payment is made in full and thereafter amount is refunded separately. Example, A agrees to purchase land from B. Total consideration is rupees 50,000. At the time of entering into agreement, A pays to B rupees 10,000 as earnest money. If under a contract it is stated, if contract duly performed, A will pay rupees 40,000 and the balance is adjusted, or A must pay 50,000 and he will refund rupees 10,000, then it is penalty. Penalty is not adjusted, amount is refunded separately. Earnest money is always paid at the time of giving consent for contract, whereas penalty is paid independent of the consent. The basic object of earnest money is to ensure due performance of the contract, whereas the basic object of penalty is that the amount serves as a deterrence for not committing breach of contract. In case of penalty, the final payment is made in full and then refunded. Before final payment, no breach of contract. If the amount is earnest money, whole amount is to be forfeited. If amount is penalty, the court can award less damages than the amount deposited. Whole of the amount is not allowed to be forfeited. With this, I conclude. In the next lecture, I would be discussing cases on breach of contract.